The first foremost thing about any Todd floor, it needs to be distinctive. We set out to create our own unique designs and our own unique approach to doing wooden flooring. Both the new wood floors and the floors that we're reclaiming and manufacturing here in the UK, the starting point is where is the wood coming from. And when we reclaim a floor, we will find something which is deeply unusual. These are things that we seldom come across. You don't find them in particularly large quantities. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it's not something you'll ever find again. So overall, we look for something that's going to last a long time and is distinctive in quality. We're on the docks today in northwest Liverpool. We've come to look at some pitch pine beams that we're reclaiming for a project. They were used to build factories, warehouses. They were also used to build public buildings. They were the bedrock of our construction industry through the Industrial Revolution. And ultimately, it was substituted for steel because there was none of the timber left. There is quite a lot of the built environment in the northwest of England that still has these timbers in them, but they're becoming increasingly rare all the time. We have been buying them now for 25 years. When you cut these beams up, they make beautiful pitch pine floors. They've got wonderful grain patterns. They're very, very hard. They're harder than oak. And as you can see here, you get them in dimensions that you just couldn't buy in modern timbers. For me, that they are Herculean pieces of wood. They're very special. It's very, very exciting to find them. And we're very lucky to be able to use these timbers even today to make our floors. These wonderful beams are now back in our yard in Warrington, Cheshire. You can see here the burnishing mark from the company that's logged it. So when it was floated down the Mississippi, to be able to claim their tree when it ended its journey. Over 150 years later, the logger's mark's still on the end of the beam here. I'm quite attached to these beams. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do to them. We're thinking about making them into probably a 60 feet long floorboard, but we're currently working out how we'd actually achieve that because technically it's quite difficult to do. But these are wonderful, wonderful timbers and we're really honoured to have them in our possession. Most of the reclaimed wood floors are very much focused on the elegant side of reclaimed. The thing that's really defined a woodworks floor and why people come from all over the world to source them from us is that there's an elegance about them. There's a subtlety about them, and that's the bit that we spend the most amount of time doing, is creating this elegance within the floor. And that comes down to all the hours of handwork that we put into polishing and finishing the floors. Quite often you're looking at 6 to 9 months before we actually start to supply it to our customers. You know, even the process of just moving it, getting it into stock, labelling it all, can take quite a lot of time. Then we take all the metal out of it, that'll be the nails, the bolts. And then we'll spend some time thinking about the raw materials to how we want to process it. Quite a lot of it is customer driven, so sometimes it will be down to a specific project that we've got to deliver, but very often we're having to cut all the material, we're having to dry it. If it's going to be engineered, then we're having to bond it all up and then reprofile it. The part of the whole process that takes the most amount of time is how we actually restore the surface of the floor. That's a process that takes many, many weeks to do, and we're looking to maintain as much as possible as the original patina on the floor whilst freshening it up to be used again. And that's the bit where our craftspeople here take the most amount of time. Quite often on, say, an antique floor, you're looking at polishing the floor maybe 10 to 12 times as part of that process, and that's before we actually finish it. So it's a very, very labour-intensive process, but to get the elegant surface that we're after, that's the level of detail we go into. I think a great thought about these timbers is that the experiences that they've had, the things that they've seen, from the hundreds of years that they've sat in savanna lands in North America to the time which they were floated down the Mississippi and then transported across the Atlantic and then used in these buildings in Liverpool for the last 130 years. I think that is a fantastically exciting proposition of which I think you'd go a long way to find any other raw material or item that could tell a similar story. But that's only part of the story. And the most exciting thing about these timbers is the story going forward, the next adventure that they go on to have. And that could be anywhere from being in somebody's new home to being in a ship or another industrial building or a smart office. And I think that the journey that they continue to have to us is as important as the journey they've already had. And we take great pride in setting these materials, these beams, off on a new adventure that's hopefully as exciting as the adventure they've already had.